Hey, good morning. Patricia Murphy here. It's Saturday. This is Seattle Now. Today, we're bringing you the best from the KUOW newsroom. In 2021, Washington became the first state to pay for attorneys for low-income tenants facing eviction. But as the eviction rate skyrockets in King County, there aren't enough attorneys to go around. As Ann Dornfeld reports, some people have been evicted while they're still on a wait list. Here's Ann.
Last November, Jessica Mitchell Butler got an eviction notice from the landlord of her low-income apartment on Capitol Hill.
It's nerve-wracking, to say the least. So I look things up and see, what are my time frames, what is this and this.
Mitchell Butler didn't think the landlord had grounds to evict her, and the notice said she had the right to legal counsel. She called the King County Bar Association's Housing Justice Project, which assigns lawyers to low-income tenants facing eviction. At her first court hearing in February, Mitchell Butler told the judge she was waiting to be assigned an attorney and was told to come back to court in March. But at her second hearing in March, she was still waiting.
Let's move on to number 7 on the calendar, Low Income Housing Institute versus Mitchell Butler. Ms. Mitchell Butler, can you tell me, have you been able to speak with a lawyer from HJP?
I did, but they were not able to assign me with one yet.
Your Honor, this is Renee Ballou with Housing Justice Project. Just wanted to confirm that Ms. Mitchell Butler is on our wait list.
All right.
The judge said because Mitchell Butler had been waiting for months already, the hearing could not be delayed any longer and she'd have to represent herself that day. The eviction defense law only guarantees lawyers for low-income tenants if the program is fully funded. The judge found in the landlord's favor and said Mitchell Butler could be evicted. That day in court, Mitchell Butler says, every other tenant waiting for an attorney was evicted too. Allie Kingston manages the state's eviction defense program.
I think that we have been incredibly successful in running this program statewide. And it was only recently that just the sheer volume of case filings in King County became a challenge.
Kingston says they've been able to provide attorneys for low-income tenants in other counties, but in King County, the demand has doubled as case filings skyrocketed. In the first quarter of this year, eviction filings were nearly double the 2019 rate due to a combination of factors, including the cost of housing and the lifting of seasonal eviction moratoriums.
The number really exceeded what our initial capacity was.
At King County Superior Court, presiding Judge Ketu Shah says eviction cases became overwhelming in the past year, with backlogs as long as 10 months. They had to add 2 new judges focused on eviction cases, which now take about 10 weeks to resolve.
We would love to have everyone have an attorney who needs to have an attorney. We have to balance that with what the available resources are for all of these organizations, and also, making sure that cases get heard in a reasonable time frame.
Landlords are frustrated with the delays too, which they say can massively run up their costs in legal bills and unpaid rent. The eviction defense program received funding from the state legislature for another 5 attorneys in King County beginning in July. But Kingston says whether that meets the demand depends on how many new cases landlords file. In the meantime, the program recently began guaranteeing full representation in King County only to tenants with disabilities or limited English. Other people who qualify based on income for legal help can get guidance for their eviction cases, help with settlements and other legal services, but if they go to court, they may have to represent themselves. Mitchell Butler says she started out hopeful and ended up feeling defeated.
And I feel like we're not treated as people. I feel like just my side wasn't heard in the entire situation because I didn't have the proper representation. I was not heard.
She was spending her final days in her apartment looking for a place that would take someone who was freshly evicted and waiting for a sheriff's deputy to come to her door.
I'm not ready to give up my little space that I built. I built a little home and it's comfortable. Every day I wake up, I'm anxious. Are they going to show up today? 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 What's going on?
Ann Dornfeld, KUOW News.
Butterflies have been having a hard time in the Northwest and nationwide. At least one endangered butterfly here in Washington state appears to be beating the odds and flapping away from extinction. Captive breeding of Taylor's checkerspot butterflies has some Puget Sound grasslands aflutter with rare insects this spring. John Ryan reports from a prairie south of Olympia.
Biologists use lots of different technologies to keep track of their wild subjects. Some salmon get tiny transponders injected beneath their skin. Migratory birds might get solar-powered satellite tags glued on their backs. For her work with endangered butterflies, Erica Henry uses a glitter pen.
It's very high-tech.
Why do you use that?
Because it's really easy to see when they fly around. It just stands out.
Henry is a prairie ecologist with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Western Washington is known for its forests, but it's also home to shortgrass prairies, a favorite habitat for butterflies. In a prairie full of wildflowers, Henry gets down on all fours, then ducks under a low mesh tent. With a plastic bowl, she delicately scoops up a tiny jewel of an insect that's clinging to the tent.
It's got a black fuzzy body. They're surprisingly fuzzy.
It's a Taylor's checkerspot butterfly. Each wing looks like a mini masterpiece of stained glass art in orange, black, and white.
This one is federally endangered. We are trying to recover its populations. You know, there are only a handful of sites where this butterfly still exists.
She grips it gently, pinching all four wings between her thumb and forefinger.
The key is to have the wings under control, being like confident and gentle. If you're too dainty, they'll flop around and can hurt themselves.
Henry writes on her own hand first to make sure the ink is flowing so she doesn't scratch the butterfly's delicate wing. Then she gives the checkerspot its glittery number.
This is 28. It's a female.
Once the butterfly is labeled, Henry sets it free.
Whoop, there she goes.
Then she walks to the next little tent to mark and release more butterflies. Few people get to see, let alone touch, this colorful species. Each adult butterfly only lives about 1 week. These checkerspots were brought to the prairie as caterpillars back in March. They were raised in a greenhouse about 40 miles away.
We take care of them from the time they're an egg all the way up until they become a butterfly. So my name is Trista Egley, and I am a butterfly technician for SPP.
That's the Sustainability in Prisons project.
I've been incarcerated for 3 years this month.
Egley is one of 7 inmates who are raising endangered butterflies at the Mission Creek Correction Center for Women in Mason County. They do their work in greenhouses just outside the prison gates.
It's really just a great feeling being trusted to care for this endangered species. Like, how cool is that, you know? But also, it's a huge, huge privilege that we're given, and we take it very seriously.
Egley says she's proud to have raised more than 20,000 checkerspots in 3 years. Caring for the butterflies has enabled her to start thinking about the future again.
It's probably the most meaningful and fulfilling work I've ever done in my life.
Egley is serving a 9-year sentence for a drunken hit and run. She ran into 2 pedestrians, one of whom was left brain damaged.
We deal with a lot of shame and guilt on a daily basis, just being incarcerated and the reasons that got us here. And so for me, it's been a place where I've been really able to process through that and heal from those feelings of guilt and shame and just really missing my family.
Egley says just as the caterpillars transform into butterflies, she sees transformations in the women that care for the checkerspots.
It's funny, sometimes I think oh, we're saving these butterflies, but deep down, they're kind of saving us.
Deflection 3278.
Some of the best habitat for these butterflies is being saved in explosive ways. That's an Army training video of heavy artillery at Joint Base Lewis McChord, south of Tacoma. Prairies need disturbance to survive, or else they get overgrown by shrubs and trees. For millennia, that meant fires set by indigenous people. On the JBLM training grounds, artillery does the trick. Dan Calvert works to preserve prairies on and off base.
JBLM has 90% of the remaining prairie habitat in western Washington.
That makes the military stronghold a butterfly stronghold. The base has to protect habitats under the Endangered Species Act. But Calvert says protecting prairies also serves military purposes.
If you're not burning on a regular basis, you're going to get conifer encroachment. You're going to have Scotch broom, and that is bad for prairie habitat and the species that are there, but that also it doesn't support the kinds of land uses and training that JBLM wants to maximize.
Wide open spaces are good for things like long-range shooting and off-road driving. The base also sets fires intentionally to restore prairies, and it funds efforts to protect prairies off base from development to reduce conflicts with its neighbors.
Things like noise, artillery, smoke. People close to the base, you don't want to have machine guns shooting close by developments.
Off base, Thurston County has a federally approved plan that requires anyone developing prairie land to take measures to protect prairies someplace else. These sorts of programs might evaporate soon, The Trump administration wants to reinterpret the Endangered Species Act so it would no longer protect habitats.
That'd be just devastating. I mean, that's just ridiculous, really.
Biologist David James studies insects at Washington State University.
It's not just butterflies, it's every organism is linked to their habitat. Without the habitat, they don't exist. There can be no endangered species protection without that, really.
Back at the Wildflower Prairie, it appears to be a banner year for the endangered checkerspots. Biologist Andrew Deshane is walking a transect. He counts butterflies and records his findings into his phone.
3 together flying at 0.3 meters. Another one flying at...
He lets his excitement spill into his science as more and more checkerspots appear.
5. Single checkerspot flying at 0.4 meters. Okay, let this roll. We're getting some activity here, baby. 2 flying together at...
His glitter pen-wielding colleague, Erica Henry, says checkerspots were hit hard by the Northwest's heat dome 4 years ago. The plants they feed on withered. But now the prairie pollinators seem to be bouncing back. That would mean they're doing much better than most American butterflies.
Overwhelmingly more species are declining than increasing.
Henry co-authored a recent study on the rapid decline in butterflies nationwide.
We've really lost a lot in 20 years, which is not a very long time.
Scientists say habitat loss is the main culprit, though pesticides and climate change have also taken a toll. But Henry says there's a bright spot for checkerspots and other butterflies. They respond fast to changing conditions.
So if conditions are good, populations can really explode. And so they can recover from bad years pretty quickly.
That means efforts to save butterflies can yield fast results. John Ryan, KUOW News.
All right, let's take it down for our final story today. Many people enjoy sake, the Japanese rice wine. But now a local brewing company is betting diners will save some room for Korean rice wine. Ruby DeLuna introduces us to the founders of Rain Brew in Woodinville.
Peter and Sophia Jung are the brother-sister team behind Rain Brew. At their Woodinville brewery, they show me a vat of rice porridge made with 3 basic ingredients: rice, water, and nuruk, a fermentation starter. The mixture has a consistency of wet oatmeal.
So this is only 3 days old, but you can smell the fruitiness a little bit.
After 10 days of fermenting, the batch will be filtered. The end product is rice wine called makgeolli, a traditional brew in Korea. Of all the Korean alcoholic imports, this rice wine is the least known in the U.S., but the Jung siblings hope to change that. What makes makgeolli different from other rice wines is that it's cloudy, almost milky in color. It's effervescent like kombucha.
We also leave our stuff unpasteurized, which is a really big thing. Now, that's the traditional way of doing it. When you pasteurize it, it does change the flavor a little bit, and so it makes, I think ours is a little bit more fresh and bright.
You get more complexity, I would say, more funkiness, and also a sourness, because it is a wild ferment. So the sourness is similar to like yogurts or natural wine or kombucha.
Peter Jung didn't set out to become a brewer. It started as a pandemic project. His mom spends half her time in Korea, where traditional makgeolli was making a comeback, but she couldn't find that here in Seattle.
The funny thing is we're not really drinkers. We're kind of allergic. A lot of Asians have that genetic allergy to alcohol.
In the process of researching and testing recipes, Peter found out makgeolli doesn't cause the same adverse reaction, partly because of its lower alcohol content. For the Jungs, the endeavor is more than just making rice wine. It's about preserving a tradition that almost disappeared. This humble brew, also known as farmer's drink, was prohibited during the Japanese occupation. Grain shortages also prolonged the ban. These days, makgeolli is enjoying a revival thanks to the younger generation who are driving interest in making their own home brews, just like the generations before them had done before it became mass-produced. Sophia says working in the brewery connects her to her Korean roots.
I kind of see it as a survival story, the fact that this is still around after all this time, after industrialization, after the war and all that kind of stuff. So if it made it this far, might as well see how much farther it can go and see how much farther it can go outside of Korea.
So is America ready for makgeolli? Lois Ko, owner of Sweet Alchemy Ice Creamery in Seattle, thinks so. KUOW uses the lees, or the sediment left over from Rain Brew's filtering process, to make ice cream. The flavor is winning fans, both her staff and customers.
Some of my college student kids, they are like, it tastes like bread, like sweet white bread.
She says people already drink sake and soju, but compared to these alcoholic drinks, makgeolli is easier to drink. The hard part, she says, might be the pronunciation. But here's her tip.
It's pronounced like a broccoli with an M in the beginning. So it's makgeolli. Once you get it, then you get it.
Rain Brew is one of a handful of makgeolli brewers in the U.S. Sophia Jung says their mother, whose search for locally crafted makgeolli led to their venture, came up with a name. She says the name reflects in part their home in the rainy city. The name is also a reference to Korean tradition.
Makgeolli was a rainy day beverage. When it was raining outside, people would say, let's go drink makgeolli.
A brew for a rainy city. Ruby DeLuna, KUOW News.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Our production team includes Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.